Hi everybody, welcome to a special Prog Report episode. As you've all been waiting patiently, we've finally gotten to the letter C of our A to Z series. It's taken us some time, which is kind of funny, but Geoff is back. Hey Geoff, how you doing, man?
Hi, Roy. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we're cantering our way through the alphabet and we've got to the third letter already.
Yeah,
Wow.
at this point, we should be finished in about 20 years. We'll see.
Yeah.
So we did the letter A and B started off as just audio podcasts, and they're out there. We did put the audio version up on YouTube as well if you have to catch up. But seeing as how everything is video these days, we're going to go ahead and do this on there as well. It's also on the audio podcast as well as all the other things. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, our podcast networks, wherever you listen, and all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. And anyway, so what we're going to try and tackle today is letter C. If you haven't watched the other ones or listened to the other ones, rather, we try to pick generally 3 categories per letter. Artist, album, song, or maybe alternate one of them with something else. Like for B, we did bass guitar, and, that kind of thing. We'd love to hear your comments on what we missed, what albums, artists, or songs, or something else fits the letter that maybe we forgot, or what you think is better. But it's really just for fun and to give us something to talk about. But all right, so for letter C, we're each doing 3 things. Geoff, you go ahead and start. What are you going to go with first?
No, well, clearly we missed lots of things, only doing 3 things each. And sometimes when I think about these things, I think there's something really obvious that I should pick. But it seems that's the place to start rather than something obscure. So maybe not a massive surprise for those of you that know me, that my first C is Close to the Edge.
Album,
Obviously,
I'm assuming.
album. And obviously, in the news recently, Yes did a European tour where they featured it. They've done some shows in Japan. They're about to do some US dates where that features. And I think I maybe mentioned it when I reviewed the show, but it was meant to be the Relayer tour, the Relayer album series tour, and then they changed it, and that was a bit disappointing. But actually, I went to see that show, and it really just brought it back to me. That album is really a standout one in Yes's catalog. It's a standout one in the world of prog. A sidelong track, just so much inventiveness, so much musical invention. From the kind of the soundscapey type intro to some of the very fast, crazy guitar keyboard playing, but all the melodic stuff. Siberian Catrue, the perennial Yes show opener, and the You and I, possibly one of the greatest kind of majestic prog songs that ever exists. The cover that's that Yes logo that sort of came on 50 years later, it's still the definitive logo and image associated with the band. John Anderson, Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, Chris Squire, and the last album with Bill Bruford. So sort of an end of an era as well for Yes whenever Bruford left. And I suppose that kind of Wakeman, Howe, relatively newcomers to the band had certainly joined within the previous 2 years, but within a very short space of time produced something that's just considered a classic.
Has that album sort of gained in sort of the lore of being the greatest album of all time in the last maybe 5-10 years? Because I don't remember growing up it being considered the greatest prog album of all time. I think that's sort of maybe something that's been labeled upon it more in recent years. Do you think that's fair?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think probably if you talk to 10 Yes fans, they'll probably all have a different favorite Yes album. They'll probably have a different favorite lineup. But I think just it, yeah, I mean, I think that's fair enough. And I think probably it's because things like Prog Magazine and things like these kind of podcasts
and
started
websites, and then all of a sudden people are talking about it and it's becoming and voting on it and that kind of thing. because growing up, it was always like Fragile. It was always Fragile.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
the album
yeah,
cover. That
yeah,
was
yeah,
Roundabout. That was Heart of the Sunrise. And I always thought that was the album. That was the one.
yeah. No, I totally. I mean, Fragile. Fragile. I mean, Fragile is an amazing album, right? But I kind of a lot of the solo tracks are skip pastable for me. I
Yeah.
think if anything, they sort of dilute the brilliance of some of what's on there. But I mean, I'm a massive Yes fan. I'm saying that relative to some of the amazing stuff that they've produced. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's a good
So,
point.
yeah. Anyway, I am going to see that tour in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
So looking forward to that. It's always fun. Always fun to see. And they're playing
Yeah.
a lot of kind of obscure. It's like a two set kind of
Mm.
show, and the first set is a bunch of weird songs from different records, which is kind of neat. So
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
that should be fun. All right, so I think I'll stick with
Well,
album for
okay.
mine. And you know what's funny? So I jotted down some notes of a few different records, and not without sort of thinking, I went, well, obviously, Court of the Crimson King. That's got to be one, but
Is that a C?
it doesn't start with C, does it? So I realized that at the end. I'm like, nope, that doesn't actually count. So I'm going to skip that one. But
Yep.
I want to make sure I mention that because I figured someone in the comments or something would say that we forgot it. But technically, it starts with in, so doesn't
Yep.
really count. Um, so I'm going to go just to keep it a little bit different and more relevant because of what's transpired recently, in that I went to see the Porcupine Tree closer continuation show a few weeks ago. I'm gonna go with that as my album, so kind of bridge 50 years really
Okay.
between our choices, which is kind of cool, really, if you think about it. That
Yeah. Well.
this genre is sort of carried on for that long, and Porcupine Tree being one of the you know carriers of the flame, I guess you would say, over the years. So begrudgingly, rather, if you ask Stephen
Yeah.
Wilson.
Yeah.
But as most people know, if you don't know, I mean, the band were gone for about 12 years or so, and secretly sort of throwing back and forth ideas over the last few years, and decided, I guess, because of pandemic or whatever, there was a bit more time to work on the material, and decided to put out this record. Just the three of them, Gavin
Hmm.
Harrison, Richard Barbieri, and Stephen Wilson. Colin Edwin, um, not involved for various reasons that maybe sort of have been made public, but not really. And but Stephen played bass on it and did a phenomenal job. 7 tracks with 3 bonus tracks that most people will agree are as good as anything else on of the 7.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
want to make sure you get the version that has all 10 songs. And I think online on streaming services, you get all 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some great stuff on there like Harridan, Dignity, Never Have, which is one of the bonus tracks, which I love. Chimera's Wreck, which is a cool, epic kind of prog number. On the show, which I saw, they're playing the main 7 songs throughout the set,
Hmm.
and with the help of Randy McStein and on guitar, Nathan Navarro on bass. Both guys are excellent, and yeah, I think it's a solid record. It's one that I think many people. I don't know what the expectation was. I think the album just suffered from expectation because it's a very very good album. And months later, listening to it, it it holds. It's still a good listen. But maybe off the bat, it didn't knock me off my feet. And I think I sort of got that feeling from most people. It's good. No one has said it's bad, but
Yeah.
it just didn't blow you away. But I think that it actually has had some staying power for the last 6 months or so for me. And listening to the record, what's your take on it?
I was wondering whether you were going to confess that because I knew that was what the reaction to it was. I think I liked it a lot from the start. I just liked the raw edge. I just like it sounded like Porcupine Tree were back. It didn't sound like Stephen Wilson with another set of guests. So I was very happy to hear it. And I think probably when it landed was round. I think we got the review copy. It was round about the time when I had just been in a phase of listening to Porcupine Tree anyway, and so it very naturally fitted in. I don't think I'm going to get to see a show unless something lucky happens with a ticket for London. But you know, it's really got me into them, and just seeing you know, seeing some of the reviews and stuff of the tour, it really seems to be phenomenal. So I can't wait to see that documented.
I can see how they went with these tracks, so because live they work really well,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah,
that elevated them a little bit for me. Tracks like Herd Calling and Walk the Plank, they were actually work really well live. Um, I think the thing that was missing for me initially from the record was just the sort of Pink Floyd vocal harmony that were so
mm,
prevalent in the earlier records.
yeah, yeah,
And they went a little bit more for a raw, stripped down sound
yeah,
mostly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Probably as raw. I mean, it's probably as raw as they've sounded from their very, very early albums, and
yeah.
which did have that Floydier edge. And I think that was why I probably it kind of it made sense to me, because I'd been digging into their really early stuff and the box set of that stuff that had come out. And I suppose it reminded me a lot of Signify, which was the first album that of theirs that I'd kind of heard. I mean, the more I listen to it, the more I think there's a lot of parallels between those albums. Just stylistically, the style of the instrumentals and the sort of approach. I think the it's it's there's obviously lots of elements, but I think there are bits of it that are quite like parts of that. So
Yeah.
the funny thing is, I was sort of looking for ideas for choices for this, and I was going into my iTunes and reading down the names of albums that started with the letter C, and I came across one and went, gosh, it's been a long time since I've listened to this, and I wasn't going to make it one of my choices, which I'm not, but it was actually Lo-Fi Resistance, which was kind of Randy McStein's first kind of outing. I don't know if you've
Chalk
ever,
lines.
yeah,
Is that
Chalk Lines, yeah, yeah. And it's, I actually played it in the car on the way home today, and I really, really enjoyed it. I haven't listened to it for a very long time, but it's 10 years old. It's
Yeah, actually, well, I
2012, and I
think I
was like,
remember
my
actually
goodness,
discovering that through the Gavin Harrison connection, because that was when I
yeah,
was listening to them, and that's how I
yeah.
discovered Randy and that album. Yeah, that's
So,
good. That's a good one.
but
Yeah, so they have a long connection. People that may not realize, but that's the Gavin connection with Randy is pretty long. My
yep,
honorable mention for a C album, which I almost went with, was Crime of the Century by Supertramp, which is a personal favorite and
I could have
like
guessed
a
that.
big time favorite album.
I flicked past it and went, oh, that could be a Roy pick.
Yeah,
It'll certainly
yeah,
be in his
yeah.
list.
But I thought this one actually made more sense. So, all right, so that's cool. Those are albums. What do you got next?
So anyway, the letter C. Uh, so
Just
I've picked the song for my second choice, and I think probably whenever I was trying to think of things, this seemed like an obvious one to pick, because it's probably one of the best known prog songs outside of people who like prog. Carry On Wayward Son,
yeah, okay. I had that
by
one as one of
by
them.
by Kansas. Probably, certainly within, I would say, me hearing this type of music, one of the first songs that I had heard that was quite different from a lot of the stuff I'd heard. You know, what can I say about Carry On Wayward Son? And that was, I was really going to pick it. What do you say that hasn't been said? But I think, I mean, it's a classic. It has brilliant guitar, keyboards, that vocal intro. It's melodic, it's catchy. It's a song that could be played anywhere, and most of the people there, if they're over 20 years old, would know it. And I think there's not many prog songs that probably have that amount of there's musical complexity in it. There's time signature changes, there's pretty dramatic shifts in terms of what's going on, yet it's still very accessible. And I can't, there's not a whole pile of music that you could say that about.
No,
So yeah.
it's a unique song, and we know that intimately because we did cover the song amongst us and our Prog Report friends, and
Mm.
you can try and find them. We've shared it before. We've done it, and I had never learned that song before. We were trying to do that, and it's not Dream Theater hard, but it's a challenge. It's a challenging song, and just brilliantly written. That's the thing I came away with when learning that song was like, wow, this he really went off on this song with all the different parts, the key changes, all the different stuff that back then, and to make that a hit,
Yeah.
it's amazing. It really, it's one of the all time amazing songs. It really is.
And I have a feeling that it, I'm sure we probably talked about this maybe in one of the top tens or something, but I'm pretty sure it was like one of those things where it was the very last song written by the album for the album, or it was the one that they weren't going to put on the album. I think it has a certain amount of that
I think that
associated
if I
with it.
remember, it's in the documentary where they describe it, where they felt like they didn't have a hit, and then he went and he wrote that song and played it for Kersner over the
Don
phone.
Kirshner. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
he was like, and he was blown away. I was like, yep, that's the hit. They knew right away. Yeah, back then, I guess it's a song that could have worked. I mean, congrats to them because it's actually again it's along with Close to the Edge where in the last 10, 15 years it's been a resurgence for them based on that
Mm,
song, and you
mhm.
have younger younger people, teenagers, things like that nowadays that they know that song
Yeah,
through Spotify, through video games, through whatever, and it's carried on the legacy of the band. So
yeah.
I think that song alone, if, and well, along with Dust in the Wind, warrants them being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think it's criminal that they're not.
Mm.
But anyway, yeah, that one makes sense. For my choice for song, I'm trying to be a little bit different because the problem is we were talking about this before. When you go through these lists, it's always the same bands,
Mm.
and it's the bands that have a long history. So, you know, you can go through Genesis and it's just like 10 different songs that start with C and they're all amazing.
Mm.
Carpet Crawlers, Cinema Show, on and on. So I want to try and keep it a little bit more modern and maybe people, if maybe don't know this band or not, but I'm going to go with Haken and Cockroach King. And see, because, for last 10 years, if you want to talk about a band
Yeah.
that's come up in the last 10 years that has paved the way for themselves and made a career and become one of the more relevant known bands. Haken is definitely one of a few that has done that,
Yeah.
and arguably Cockroach King is their most well known song. Um, and it's a really bizarre song that is heavily influenced from like Gentle Giant and that kind of 70s classic prog. So that is as proggy as you can get. And again, that's really unique in 2022. Or well, they wrote it in 2013 to come up with that song at that time and break through with that. Is
Yeah.
unique. I think it's special.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard it, check it out. This video, very cool video on YouTube for it, and actually they have a new album that they've written that's should be coming soon, sometime next year. There's a new single that they recently released called Nightingale. So they're doing their
Mm.
thing, and Haken is a band to keep an eye on.
Roy knows that he's putting me on the spot here because he also knows that this isn't necessarily my favorite Hagen song. And I'm not necessarily going to say anything bad about it, except to say that there are lots of Hagen songs that I prefer more than Cockroach King. That said, when I saw them supporting Devin Townsend and the crowd go mad, how can you argue with it as a good song? It really
And of
is.
course, a few other honorable mentions, like I said. I mean, the Genesis songs, and then Rush Closer to the Heart, which I thought was another one, and
Mhm.
Cygnus X1, which is if you want to go Rush. But I thought I'd go Haken and mess it up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's good spread of the eras. It's like I pick the old stuff and you pick the more
Right.
modern stuff.
Right. Band now, artist. I think is going to be interesting. I'm curious if that's where you went for your
Nope,
third category. Okay.
no, I didn't. I went with something completely different, but that I thought would be interesting. So what I went with for C, and this was actually through scanning through album titles and coming and actually scanning through, and it's just, well, there are actually, I think more correctly, single titles, but Steven Wilson put out a series of six singles that he called cover version,
Uh,
with a cover version on one side and an original song on the other. So I thought that got me thinking about prog cover versions of other songs, and thought that might be an interesting thing to talk about because it took me back to, I'm sure you probably know this, but probably one of the earliest kind of versions of that, Vanilla Fudge's version of You Keep Me Hanging On, which is sort of taking that Supremes Diana Ross song and turning it into this kind of
mhm.
wild, kind of crazy
Yep.
thing. Um, and I suppose what came to mind, that Steven Wilson set where he does things from like Alanis Morissette to Prince to The Cure, and I suppose in terms of bands we like, the two kind of contrasts, because again, what I was looking today at was some of the reissued stuff that Dream Theater have put out where they cover, Master of Puppets and Number of the Beast, they cover the whole album, um, but they pretty much play it straight. And then you have, I suppose, on the other extreme, things that Neil Morse Band have done, like
The cover to
MacArthur
cover albums.
Park, like, well, the cover to cover albums are fairly straight, but then you've got MacArthur Park,
Mm.
which is a prog reworking of that. We've got Bridge Over Troubled Water. So I was trying to think what other prog cover versions are there,
No, it's
which are
tough.
versions of other songs.
Yeah, it's tough to come to mind. I mean, I know certainly there's a bunch, but I'm not a huge cover version person.
Hmm.
What would your favorites be?
Yeah, I like that version of Bridge Over Troubled Water. I think it's really, really good because whenever I even saw the title and thought, how could you how could you not do something like that
Well, if
that
you want to
would
go
would
cover and keep
would
it
ruin
within
it?
the letter C, Crazy Horses
Crazy Horses. Yeah, yeah.
is a good one
Yeah.
and a really unique one that Portnoy brought to everyone's attention because I think a lot of people didn't know the Osmonds did anything remotely that heavy,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that's a fun one. But yeah, that's
Uh,
cool. There's a lot of cool covers. I mean, any interesting ones that you guys are fans of? That's always pretty cool.
and I suppose also things that I was thinking about was, like some of the Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff where they, Leonard Bernstein's America. There's a few things throughout their albums where they've done
Well,
Nutrocker,
Yes is America, the
Yes
Simon and
America.
Garfunkel
Yeah,
cover, which I'd say it's a pretty notable one actually.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, interesting.
So prog cover versions. What are your favorites? Let us know.
Yeah. Um, so well, with artists, I guess I'll tackle that one. Maybe I'm missing something. I mean, there's certainly a number of letter C's, but I think the most notable easily has to be Camel.
Caravan would be the other one.
Caravan would be the
Again,
other one.
I think they probably wouldn't be a band that I would
Modern, if we're
particularly
sticking with my
know.
modern directive, would be Caligula's Horse would probably be my direction. But I think for this purpose, I'll go with Camel. I think that's probably a major one there. Early 70s, led by Andy Latimer, guitarist. It's very well known. Um, I mean, I think the main album from them is the Snow Goose.
Yeah,
That's probably be the one that's most famous. There's another one called Mirage. I think those early 70s records are pretty good. We did the Snow Goose on our Progist
that's right.
thing a couple of years ago, which was pretty cool and not a band I heavily have listened to much, but I do think that's a really brilliant piece of work. And of course, now they tour with Pete Jones as a member of the band, and he's brilliant with everything he does. Um,
There's, I mean, Snow Goose is instrumental.
yeah.
And I can't remember what it's called, and I can't see it directly here, but there's a very, very good live DVD that they put out a few years ago, with Pete Jones singing.
Hmm.
And I think they maybe have a new. I think maybe they have some, either a new tour or a new live album or a new something with Pete coming up. But I think the other thing about Camel that's very influential is um the guitar playing. Certainly, I've always felt a lot of similarity to what Steve Rothery ended up doing in Marillion. I think there's a lot of similarities between Andy Latimer's playing and Steve Rothery's, which is obviously why I did the Marillion thing, because I knew you were going to choose that. But
Okay,
they
there you
do.
go.
I mean, they have a huge catalog of albums, and I'm
Yeah,
probably only familiar with 3 or 4 of them.
yeah,
And
same.
again, a band that I thought, you know, I probably should listen to more of. Caravan, I know, in the Land of Pink and Grey is
Right.
probably the kind of the one of the definitive, and probably one of the
Yeah, I
very,
should
very
have mentioned them
early,
as well. Yeah, that's a pretty big album as well.
one of the
From
early
the
prog
classic
albums.
era. Yeah, yeah.
And another band that are actually still going, relatively unbroken for like, 40 plus years, and still producing music, still doing stuff, and probably quite influential on someone like Andy Tillotson and the Tangent. I know that kind of whole Canterbury scene stuff that Caravan were part of is quite influential. In some, you'll hear a lot of that in his music.
A C choice could have been just Canterbury. That could have been a
Canterbury,
C choice.
indeed. Yeah, yeah. Have you ever been in
But
Canterbury? I'm sure you
sort of
have.
covering it
Been in
in our
Canterbury.
in talking about this. So
Indeed.
that's how we're getting that in.
Planned accidents.
Yeah, exactly. See, we've prepared very much for this. Uh, anyway, yeah, this is cool. Also, something new that I jotted down just because it's new and sticks with the Haken theme. Charlie Griffiths,
Yeah.
the guitars for Haken, who just released a solo album this year. So sticking with the letter C there. Yeah,
I also
that's
had I also had, when I was thinking of bands, and I probably thought this might be a little bit too obscure for you, but Circa, the band that Bill is mostly
not
Billy
familiar with them.
Sherwood
Yep.
and Tony Kaye. Yeah, I mean, they've produced probably 5, 6 albums over the course of time, nearly always with a virtually different lineup than the one before. But their very first one, self-titled, or I think it's maybe called 2007, is a really good album. I think it's probably their very best one. But then they put out one recently called Valley of the Windmill. I knew it was something to do with windmills. Yeah, Circa, a very good relatively recent album. Circa.
Yep. So that covers the letter C. Sort of schizophrenic episode a little bit, but if you have
Back to
it,
your back to, actually, I was just thinking there, because back to your very first choice. So the album is called In the Court of the Crimson King, but the song is called The Court of the Crimson King, which I would count as a C.
right,
So we could have done it. And they,
put
of
down the
course, have
song.
the documentary coming out very soon, called Court of the Crimson King, which
Are you going
I'm
to be able to
looking
see that?
forward to seeing.
Are you doing
Yeah,
it?
it's showing in a cinema in Belfast, so I'm planning to go and see that. Looking forward to that. I know someone who saw it at a festival in Dublin at the weekend and said it was brilliant, really enjoyable. And actually, he said, like, probably a lot of, I suppose, I know that I was talking to some of you about the Sparks Brothers documentary and going, even if you don't know their music at all, it's really entertaining. And he compared it to that, in terms of, it's just a really great story, and it's funny, and
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
it's cleverly put
I
together.
love music documentaries like that. I can always watch those. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for sticking around and joining us for the letter C. And we promise we will have the letter D episode out sooner than the previous ones. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.